Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Carnero Cox. I am head of marketing and business development at WonderBotz. I am thrilled to be bringing forward two experts, our partner and friend, Rob from Blue Prism, and our very own Martin, who leads our UK practice, for this discussion about what's next. As Blue Prism has announced that the end of life of version 6 on-prem is taking place in the early months of 2025, it's incumbent on us as advisors and longtime partners to help our clients understand what it is they need to be thinking about as they prepare for their next waves of budgeting for automation. Now, we all know that we're trying to figure out what AI is going to do for our organization, what we're going to do with AI for our organization, but we have to keep the lights on the foundation and groundwork that we've set in Blue Prism, in other RPA technologies, and in some of the adjacent opportunities that have been presented as several startups have come on the scene. So for our clients, it's become almost fatiguing to understand what it is they need to do, what tool they need to bring in, and how it is that they're going to continue to drive value and produce outcomes that matter. So thrilled to turn it over to my colleague, Martin. And we are going to have not only a presentation with some stats and data from the analysts of the world who speak to clients every single day like you, but also a riveting fireside chat between our partners so that we can help you understand what kind of considerations you should be making in your quest to optimize your existing program. So with that, I will turn it over to Martin. If you guys have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat, and we'll be taking them up at the end. For those of you who submitted questions before registration, we will also be addressing those at the end of this discussion. Thanks so much. Martin, all you.
Thank you, Paula. So yeah, it's just as a brief introduction, my name is Martin Boakes. Obviously, as Paula suggested, I'm head of the UK business for WonderBotz. I've been working in automation for nearly a decade now, so far too long probably, but actually it's a really critical point. So I'm delighted to be on this webinar and have Rob join us as well from Blue Prism, because actually there is a shift, and Paula introduced that briefly, and we definitely will touch on that as we head through the next few slides. This shift towards getting more from a traditional automation platform. So the businesses are demanding more. We're seeing clients now, their traditional center of excellence teams are now being morphed into the IT departments or into the business lines. And as they do that, they're really trying to do that because they want more out of the automation platforms that they've purchased and invested in over a period of time. And that means that, you know, the adjacent technologies that we've come to see, whether it be IDP, whether it be chatbot, whether it be, you know, any of the above, and obviously AI and anything connected with AI, how do they get integrated into the automation platforms, and how do they get more value for the business? Because essentially that's what this is all about, right? And Blue Prism have taken a good leap with that, with their next version 7 and next gen, and you'll hear about those as we go through the next few slides. But I guess the first thing to say really is, you know, and this is always the, you know, anyone that signed up for this webinar and anyone watching this afterwards they'll probably be very aware of this slide, and kind of the fear or the uncertainty around what happens if you don't upgrade, right? You know, it's kind of well documented. But as we start, just as a kind of a recap here, right at the very top, the operational disruptions. You know, if there's, whether it's during an upgrade, there's always a risk of unexpected issues and challenges there. If you're skipping an upgrade or a version, then obviously that risk increases disproportionately sometimes as you move to a bigger upgrade path. And that opens up the window there for security vulnerabilities as well, right? So, you know, that's a well-documented and understood practice to make sure that you're up to speed with the latest security threats, and making sure that you're not open to data breaches or unauthorized access. That's pretty standard stuff for most people on this call, I'm sure. But the one that I really want to focus on is the missed opportunities. There's lots of new features in version 7 and next gen across the RPA space here that we'll talk about more about later. But improve scalability, enhance analytics, better AI capabilities, as I've mentioned already. That's really where we're going to see the business value. And I think if we're not upgrading, that's the missed opportunity now. And it's a great opportunity to take that leap and move away from on-premise provision and onto a cloud environment, and reap the benefits of that. There's a couple of others, and I think these last three, or certainly the next three, compatibility issues, lack of support and updates, and increased technical debt, really go side by side or hand in hand, if you like, in terms of the exposure really to the client. Compatibility issues, obviously, internally, but also with third-party software integrations, and that can disrupt the automation processes and cause downtime or disruption a bit further down the line. Again, the same with lack of support and updates, not just from Blue Prism in this instance around the version update, but actually all the supporting software that sits alongside that. The last thing then to say is, obviously, the longer you leave it, the increased technical debt you get. And that loops back to that operational disruption that we talked about right at the very beginning of this slide. Obviously, if you leave that longer, that jump gets bigger and actually causes more operational challenges as you build that in. And it would be remiss of me not to mention regulatory compliance. That's a well understood path, again, a bit like security vulnerabilities. That's the doom and gloom, right? If we don't upgrade, then there's some challenges there that we need to address or we need to manage. But that's not really what this call is about, and this webinar. Really, it's about how do we go to the next, and how do we get that business value that we were talking about. And if we look at the typical path for upgrading from version 6, there's probably the most straightforward and simplest upgrade, and that's the move to version 7. Stay relevant. It's an easy upgrade path. It's a well-trodden upgrade path. We'll hear from Rob a bit later on about some of the kind of the war stories of that before, and some of the best practices for clients to adopt. But really, we're seeing this shift that Paula mentioned right at the beginning of this call, to take the opportunity to move and migrate away from on-premise and a cloud-first environment. And some are going straight to that cloud in the middle. And there are different cloud providers. So there is Blue Prism Cloud as an option, but there are managed service providers that can provide a separate cloud view as well, and that that's again another well-documented process, but it really enables that broader portfolio of opportunities and capabilities to use, and it removes that infrastructure and management overhead that's been holding back an awful lot of organizations for quite a long time. But that really sets everyone up for the next generation, particularly where we're talking here for Blue Prism. The advanced features and functionality that they've started to put into that next generation platform is something I'm really excited to hear a bit more about from Rob later on. But it is a big leap forward, and just to kind of highlight some of those here. Version 7 is, future-proof for security. It's easy deployment. We've got the new capabilities, and we've got the new improved performance and reliability within that version 7 standard upgrade. Moving to cloud, whoever provides the cloud, gives you a much better value to the business, much quicker platform deployment. You've got a significantly reduced overhead and cost of running the platform, and of course it can scale. That all then enables you to really take advantage of what's coming next with Blue Prism and next generation. So in terms of whether it be the flexible commercial models or the deployment of new IA capabilities and AI capabilities as they come online as well. So there's something that kind of that I wanted to mention here as the next slide, really about reducing the total cost of ownership. And I've kind of highlighted that a little bit by saying actually a move away from on-premise and onto cloud really helps us do that. We've seen Gartner recently coin a phrase of BOAT, which is the Business Orchestration Automation Technologies. And what that really means is actually organizations are wanting more than just RPA. They're wanting a plethora of services and technologies that can be bolted together that allows us to reduce that total cost of ownership. It allows us to future-proof us for different technologies that we can bring to bear. And Blue Prism themselves are looking at that universal orchestrator. So I'd be interested to hear from Rob a bit later on about that as they march towards that with their next generation platform. But organizations are then actually coming to us as WonderBotz and others and saying, is there an opportunity here to look at how we're running our traditional BAU RPA environment so that we can actually focus on the innovation and growth, because actually that automation and center of excellence is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a well-trodden path, and it's now got to a point of maturity where actually it can be batched up, and there are people like WonderBotz that can run that entire environment in a much more cost-effective manner. And that allows organizations to ask some of the difficult questions about, why do I need help with upgrading? This is a standard practice for us. So why do I need that help? Actually, from an upgrade perspective from Blue Prism, it's a significant task to actually move from on-premise to cloud, and then start to be able to deploy and be able to embrace the next generation of technology advances. And as a business, what we've seen from the client's perspective is, do we take that operational disruption that we talked about right at the very beginning of this call? Do we really value the new features that we're looking for, the next shiny thing that's going to help our business? Or do we carry on building the pipeline that we've already got of RPA builds and automation builds? And that's really tricky. Of every center of excellence that I've been to over the last 12 months, they're all busy. Everyone's flat out. There's always a healthy pipeline for them to be building. There's always new features and functions that the business are asking from them. And there's always new features and functions that are coming from the vendors. So how do they manage all of that? Well, actually, at WonderBotz, we've got a brilliant model to be able to help organizations do just that. That's our job, and we're trusted and advisors to be able to help do that for them and with them. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I do know there's an unashamable plug here for WonderBotz, in that if anyone is considering that version 7 upgrade, we do have a migration path that you can come and work with us on. It's a 2-week program where we can actually leave you with your current state assessment. We look at the codes, we look at the apps, we look at all of the implications around security as well. Give you that current state analysis, and then we will look at the migration path and the recommendations for that. So we will help you do that. But rather than me continue to waffle, why don't I stop sharing my screen and just bring Rob into the conversation, if you're there, Rob. Yeah, there you are. Good to see you.
Hi, Martin.
Thanks for joining. We've got quite a good crowd here on this call, and I know it'll be played out again. But there's a few questions that, if that's okay, we can just trickle through. I mentioned earlier, and I've kind of mentioned it a number of times now, about organizations really wanting to get more from their automation platform, and in particular moving away from on-prem. And the concept of BOAT, the kind of business orchestration and automation technologies, it's a term coined by Gartner recently. Seeing a lot of news around that on LinkedIn, good, bad, and indifferent. But actually, what it stands for, I am definitely seeing in the client base this idea of it not just being RPA, it's being adjacent technologies to enable a full intelligent automation stack of technologies, and also the ability to, as a gateway into AI. It's just, can I ask your views on that and how Blue Prism are contributing to that?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's quite a big topic, right? And there's lots of individual elements that we could pick apart in the whole move towards a boat and what that is actually going to represent in terms of impact to the industry. But what I would say is, what I'm expecting it to do is it's going to bring up a lot of the points that we've been finding ourselves at SS&C Blue Prism as we've been talking to customers about how they are working with their wider portfolio of automation and orchestration tools. So when we were acquired by SS&C a few years back, SS&C brought with Blue Prism the RPA capability, but they had an existing BPM capability, which was the heart of their SS&C Chorus business. And so we've had for quite a while now this question of how these two things come together. And what I've learned as I've been speaking to customers on exactly that topic is there's no one size fits all in the industry. So some people have an RPA team that just do RPA, and separately then they have a BPM team who just do BPM activities. But then other organizations have cross-skilled teams where one developer one day might do RPA and then the next day they might do some BPM stuff, depending on what the business needs. And the collaboration between those teams is vastly different depending on what the organizational structure is like. So what I think the move towards boat is going to do first and foremost is bring to light just how differently some organizations are working out there in the market today, and some of the challenges that are going to come from bringing these technologies together, the AI leaning towards new capabilities, potentially coming into complement or even in some cases offset some of those either BPM or RPA capabilities accordingly. I think all that's going to really kind of ignite some conversation about how different people are doing these things. And there'll be some customers who have strengths in that area, and there'll be some customers who are going to be looking to Gartner and the new boats analysis that's going to be done to understand, well, if they want to drive forward some of these strategic initiatives, which vendors are the ones to look out for and to partner with. And I'm very hopeful that SS&C Blue Prism will be up there on that list as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant, and I absolutely see that SS&C will be right. I'm pleased that you mentioned the connection to their BPM capabilities in Chorus. Could you expand a little bit more around what can we get excited about within next gen? Because we talk about that leap from and I've kind of leaned on that quite a bit in this webinar, away from on-prem and onto cloud. But that's like the stepping stone into the future, right? And that's where Boat comes in. But you've got a great story with the SS&C knowledge base there to be able to really expand on that.
Yeah, for sure. So the SS&C Blue Prism Next Gen project, we've effectively what we did is we looked at our existing RPA capabilities, which have been in the market for 20 years and have served us really well. And what we wanted very much to do was plan for what was going to take us through the next 20 years. And the next gen offering is what we think is going to help drive us forward on that. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the capabilities that we have in our product portfolio today that are delivering really significant value for customers, starting with our RPA capabilities, and we're offering those as a new cloud native platform. Now, though we started with RPA, your question is quite right in terms of, well, what can we expect that to become? Because it's not going to be just an RPA platform. We're going to take the capabilities that we have in the SS&C Chorus product and our BPM capabilities, and we're going to look to bring those into that next gen platform and evolve that offering over time, so that people will be able to look towards that as a single platform that delivers all of the capabilities someone needs in an IA platform. That's going to include RPA, BPM, AI services, and many other things as well that bring humans into the loop of all of those different capabilities. And next gen is the vehicle by which we're going to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you say that, and it's exciting for the future to hear that. We've certainly seen WonderBotz have our own ARIA universal orchestrator as well, and Gartner have recognised, and we've seen a lot of interest in that from established automation clients that are looking for that next. And one of the things that we have seen within that part of that process is, and I mentioned it earlier, which was the move really away from a centre of excellence of automation in its own right, and being dragged back almost, if it was ever out, but back into the IT team and being part of either the IT team for business as usual, working alongside AI because of the capabilities, or being separated off into the business units. Are we going to see the same? Are we going to see the same roles and features and functions, or are we going to see a different skill set as we move forward?
That's a really interesting question. I think what we'll see over time is, I think there will still be distinct roles between IT and the RPA development teams and even the BPM teams that exist today. But what we'll see is by having a single platform, the collaboration between those teams is going to undergo a huge shift. When I've spoken to customers and I've asked them, what's the end goal for you in terms of this IA vision? Is it to have, just a BPM team? Is it to have just an RPA team? Is it to have one team who can do everything? Most customers have said, we'll probably have people who have specialisms, but we do want to bring these people all together into one team. And the no IA program, in my opinion, will be successful unless it's supported by IT. So that's part of that whole picture as well. I think I don't know whether we'll probably see new roles popping up as we have we have more AI capabilities in the products which are going to require more specialist expertise. Those might be new roles that get brought into these teams, or potentially people in these existing teams might be upskilled to step into those new roles. Yeah. But I don't think we're going to see much in the way of roles being fundamentally changed from what they are today, unless we're talking about someone who could only do RPA in the old world, but now because we've got capabilities that are so joined up, they might not just do RPA anymore because they have the same skill set that lends itself quite well to doing BPM activities or doing other such business work as well.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that. And is there a point, and I mentioned it again earlier, just briefly, where organizations, just in your opinion, where actually it makes sense for them to say, look, we don't want to focus on this. This is an upgrade path that we know we need to do for all the things that we said about earlier about the fear of not doing it. We want to take the benefits of and the enhancements of. We want to stay current, but actually there's this real balance, isn't there, between the operational disruption of doing an upgrade, and it's not just this one, all upgrades, versus the new features and functionality that they want and the business might want, and also, the current pipeline and keeping the lights on of the things that they've already got planned. It's a really hard balance. And one of the things that we've started to see is people say, well, hey, actually, the migration path or an upgrade path for us is something that's a well-trodden path. Can WonderBotz just manage that for us, please, while we carry on with the new features, because that's the shiny new things and the pipeline for the business, right? Have you seen much in the same way?
Yeah, I have. So there are a lot of organizations that will do exactly what you've articulated there, Martin. They will see what they've got in front of them in terms of their automation pipeline, and they will view the operational disruption that's brought in by doing an upgrade as too disruptive or too inconvenient, and so they'll put off that upgrade to do. So back when we used to do quarterly releases in the version 6 series, what that would lead you very quickly to see is someone would miss, not just 1 or 2 or 3, but then sometimes you'd be talking about 4, a gap of 4 release versions before people really realized. And then you had a much larger gap to cross. So upgrading from 6.4 to 6.5 to 6.6 was much easier than going from 6.4 to 6.10. We do have organizations who, through taking that, admittedly, what is some operational disruption on the head in terms of doing their upgrade, they've been able to move up those versions more effectively. And some of them have been partner supported in terms of how they've done that. There are customers out there who've done upgrades on their own and they've done perfectly fine. But what I would say is very, very few partner supported upgrades have I seen where customers have stepped into some of the common gotchas and potholes that can sometimes catch anyone out in terms of an upgrade, and in terms of that those offerings that can be brought into the conversation could help to highlight these things early and help organizations plan for those upgrade windows in the most efficient way possible. So it is something I've seen done as myself in terms of partner assisted upgrades to help people keep on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Rob. You kind of highlighted somewhere where I was going with that, in that we've trodden that path on behalf of clients ahead of the curve. So that's why we have the offerings, and that's why we can advise the clients, and they take the benefit of not having to learn for themselves and not avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen. So it really does makes a big difference. But there are some changes that we can have to the upgrade path that we talked about earlier, from version 6 to version 7, and then from to cloud, and then on to next gen. How can we help the clients understand that it's not simply just a patch release? It really enables that next generation. And what's your take on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So if we were to talk about next gen migration and upgrade specifically, that new platform, it's not just a new version of Blue Prism Enterprise. It's an entirely different platform and architecture, which brings with it some really important benefits. So as most people on this call will know, if you want to upgrade Blue Prism Enterprise today, you kind of have to update all of the you have to update the database, the app servers, and then the clients and the resources, all pretty much simultaneously, unless you're dealing with specific patches, to achieve a full upgrade. One of the key things that we've been able to do as we moved forward with our next gen product is decouple those upgrades. So now if you were to adopt next gen, and let's say one of the automations that you're running, you come across a problem on a digital worker, when we release an update for that digital worker components, that can be applied to that single digital worker machine, because the whole idea of the next gen offering is that the digital workers and the design studios are deployed on premise for our customers, and they communicate up with a cloud-based service for all of the infrastructure and all of the data that they need. So what that will allow us to do is decouple that connection between the services and the workers and design studio, such that we can be more flexible in terms of how those updates are rolled out. So a single digital worker can be lifted up to a new version. Likewise, you could lift up 90% of the estate to a new version, and leave 10% of the estate on the version they're currently on, because for whatever reason that upgrade's not suitable for that 10%. If there's an issue that you've come across in testing, or if there's something that you're aware of that you want to leave those resources where they are for a little while longer, that's something that you would be able to do with that next gen offering. So that's just one of the benefits that comes with that. We're also releasing much more frequently. So we do a couple of releases a month of our next gen product, so updates are much faster, and when we come across issues that we need to fix for customers, we're able to deliver those much more efficiently as well. So those are just a few of the benefits of that next gen platform, and those really contrast, I think, kind of where we are today with our current gen Blue Prism Enterprise products and where we're going over time with next gen. Every customer will eventually become a next gen customer. So there might be some people in the audience now thinking, you know, our organization isn't there in terms of our cloud adoption strategy, so we can't adopt that today. What I would say is, over the fullness of time, those benefits will come to you. It's just a question of where you are on your cloud journey, and where the right point is for us to meet you on that journey, whether it's with our hybridized offering that we currently have, or whether it's with some sort of you know, future containerized offering of the next gen capabilities as well.
Yeah, I mean, you just highlighted, and as you mentioned there, you know, these are some of the benefits. Actually, that's a huge benefit, to be able to run upgrades and almost dissociate the disparate parts of the platform, to be able to upgrade certain digital workers and not others, depending on the applications or the systems they're accessing. That's a huge leap forward for many of the clients that we're interacting with, and for many on this call, and for those that will be watching it afterwards. That's a really big leap forward in terms of capabilities from Blue Prism, and I think I don't know the customer feedback or client feedback so far, but I'm sure they're delighted with that announcement.
Yeah. And it's important to stress as well, you know, I mentioned before that there'll be some people out there who thinking that, you know, next gen's not for me currently, but it does prompt that question of, well, what does that mean for me and my current gen products? You know, if I'm using Blue Prism Enterprise today and next gen's not for me right now, does that mean I'm not going to get any more updates? Does that mean the development on the Blue Prism Enterprise things is going to stop? And I can probably just call out that the answer to that's no. You know, we continue to release updates to our Blue Prism Enterprise products, and if we get time, I'd love to share a bit of insight into how we plan to bridge these two worlds between our current gen Blue Prism Enterprise and how some of the next gen services that we believe are going to introduce real value for customers are going to be brought back to that group as well.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see if we can cover some of those on today's call, if we can. I think, as you know, because that's what people are looking for, right? That's what they want to try and understand as they're planning for the next. But one thing that I did want to ask, actually, before we get on to that, actually, you know, there's a number of people that have already gone through this process. You will have seen that firsthand. Can you share some of the things that really we ought to highlight for clients that might be sat on this call or might be sat listening to it afterwards, that are a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure either where to start, and really some of the considerations that they should really take on board straight away? I mean, there's the obvious upgrade path, and we've seen that. We can pick and choose that, but you've seen some of the best practices. You've also probably seen some of the worst as well, but we won't touch on that. Let's talk about some of the benefits and the better, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, what probably jumps to my mind when I think about that is just how varied some organizations are in terms of their practices. So we mentioned before that there are some organizations that will put off the operational disruption of an upgrade. But what I should highlight is there are some people who do the opposite. There are some people who jump on our latest releases, and within a week or 2 weeks of our kind of release, we see them, you know, raising support tickets if they've got questions, or we see them deploying the new versions into their dev and sandbox environments to give us feedback. And those customers are normally the customers who've matured their upgrade processes and the processes around how they regression test their automation estate, such that they can consume updates much more regularly than others. the shortest kind of upgrade window for a Blue Prism Enterprise upgrade I've ever seen is somewhere around, I think, 4 weeks for kind of initial deployment into development, testing of an automation estate, rollout into production. I would say that's very much on the early side. Probably 3 months is between 4 weeks and 3 months is like that early adopter bracket in terms of how fast people jump on it. But if you go to the other end of the spectrum, you know, those people who have either less mature upgrade policies or really complex environments, I've seen customers take 12 months to 18 months to upgrade. Admittedly, those are normally times where someone said, okay, well, if we're updating Blue Prism Enterprise anyway, why don't we update our operating system at the same time? Why don't we update our you know, our antivirus software at the same time? Why don't we get all these things done as the same project? And I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but what often happens is that has a ballooning effect in terms of the upgrade timeline, because every time an issue is identified and needs to be discussed, there's this process of elimination of, you know, is it the Blue Prism upgrade, or is it the OS upgrade, or is it the antivirus upgrade? And these things all come together. Whereas people who do kind of more regular upgrades and take them as they are, they often will have much shorter adoption time periods.
Yeah, and again, it makes sense, right? So, but we've all seen that ballooning effect of, well, let's take the opportunity to do this mammoth project now, with all of the different applications and systems approaching into it, and then it becomes a, well, where's the problem? And also it becomes a major operational priority, you know, to do that. You know, there's lots of teams, lots of impact into that. So, and that is an interesting point there in terms of the difference between the types of upgrade and the types of patches and fixes that are applied.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Why don't you just share a little bit, if that's okay, around that, because you've seen some different approaches to that, I know.
Yeah. So one thing that always catches people out, I think, is that people don't necessarily understand from a Blue Prism point of view, well, what's a minor update and what's a patch update and what's the level of risk associated with it. So I've seen, for example, our latest release in the market today is 7.3.1. But I've seen people say, well, we adopt an N-1 upgrade strategy, so therefore we will opt for 7.3.0 rather than taking 7.3.1. Now, what people don't realize is when we do a patch release, our patch releases are normally very, very focused in terms of their scope, and we only aim to address issues that we have had customers come to us to let us know are causing them real pain or real disruption that they can live with, but they need to see addressed in the fullness of time. So any patch release that we do, which is an increment of our minor version number, is normally is intentionally targeted to be as low risk as it can be for that patch update. So people sometimes view a patch update as being just as cumbersome as a minor version update. You know, if we go from 7.2.0 to 7.2.1, that's just as much effort as if we were to go to 7.3.0. And in reality, it's nowhere near. The number of changes is far smaller. The affected area in terms of the code base and the automation estate will be far smaller. And also the intention of those minor patch releases is iterative enhancements in terms of the quality of that minor version. So whenever a customer is out there and is considering what version to adopt, it's always, in my opinion, important to understand that the latest patch version of any release that you may consider is always going to be the one to jump for. The number of times, and I've had to explain that N-1, you know, theoretically, if you're following an N-1 upgrade, that will be the latest patch of 7.2, not the former patch version of the latest minor release. Is something that catches a lot of people out.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I mean, it's when you explain it in that way and articulate it in that way, Rob, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to follow and understand in my head. But obviously in an organization, when they're trying to balance that operational risk and they're trying to adopt their own change and controlled risk behavior, So I think, certainly I've seen that some organizations are very keen to make the changes, the latest patch upgrades, to get to the very latest version of any software, let alone automation. That's just incumbent on them as an organization to get the very latest. Or as near to. Other organizations that I work with are very, very conservative over the approach to any change to any system. And so they always lag way behind, almost at the other end of the spectrum, where they're just clipping off of end of life support for any of the applications of support they're running, which doesn't seem to make sense, to be able to adopting that. But obviously, moving away from an on-prem environment and onto a cloud-based environment makes the ability to do the smaller incremental changes much easier. And I just wondered if you wouldn't mind expanding on that just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So so if I start with our Blue Prism Cloud offering first, so our Blue Prism Cloud offering is evolving now such that whenever we release a new product to our on-prem customers, we're looking to make that same product available to our BPC customers within 3 months or so. So what we want to see is, to that point, we make upgrade slots available to our customers, and we want to see them moving up with us as we release those new versions. But they are very much kind of, the customer will contact us and we'll arrange a specific upgrade time for them to make sure it suits their business needs. If you look at the next gen side of things, it's important to call out again the hybrid deployed nature of our next gen offering as it currently stands. So everything that's hosted for our customers in the cloud, that being their kind of backend databases, the asset storage for their processes and objects, the control plane that is hosted in the cloud as well, all of those services are automatically updated to the latest versions as we release new incremental releases. It's the on-premise products components, the digital worker and the design studio, which are more kind of on the customer to update as and when they would like to. All our APIs are designed to be backwards compatible, so it isn't the case that we release a new version of our cloud service and that would anyway impact an on-premise component that's being used, unless an end of life announcement has gone out and we've deprecated a particular version that a customer's using. So those are the different kind of cloud strategies that we see. For our Blue Prism Cloud product specifically, we're definitely wanting to encourage customers to upgrade more often. That's something that we're definitely doing. We in the past have, I think everybody on our Blue Prism Cloud product is now 6.10 being the latest release of the 6 series, and that last bump is for us to get them up to 7.3, which is the version that we're upgrading people to on our Blue Prism Cloud platform now.
Yeah, and again, that makes sense. It just makes that upgrade path so much easier for them, right, at each time. We've certainly seen the same, and as I mentioned earlier, organizations that want us to manage that, they've kind of given that over to us and said, you kind of carry on with that. But we've managed that process successfully with a lot of clients, and by doing that process is so much easier. So we've seen that ourselves, which is great, because we bring more value back to the client quicker. I'm very conscious of time, and Paula will keep me true and honest. But Paula, if I can ask you to jump back in, have we had any questions from the attendees?
Absolutely. So I'll ask Kunal to join us as well for this final Q&A. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I actually took notes on things that I have to look up after the fact. So thank you so much for all of that information. Kunal, if you would join us as well. So a couple of the questions that came in, during registration actually is where we wanted to start, is how would you advise us to sequence the order of pipeline we have in the queue versus planning for this operational disruption? So Kunal, I'll start with you, and I'm sure Rob and Martin have some thoughts on that as well.
So I mean, if you already have items in the pipeline while you're planning this upgrade, to some extent, the upgrade has its own testing cycle. So what I would suggest is that the development efforts can continue to some extent with what's in the pipeline. If at the same time you can actually dedicate resources to the testing of the existing automations as well. So I would not say that it's a complete, you need to put a moratorium on it on development at the time on the pipeline. Those things can, to some extent, if there is the capacity to do that, those can exist in conjunction.
Perfect. Rob, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 phases to any upgrade, right? There's the planning phase in which you assess. There's the planning phase in which you look at all the different versions that are available to you and you opt for the version that you want to pick. There's the assessment phase where you go into kind of more detail around the release notes and the changes that are going to be included in that version. And then the 3rd phase is the execution of the upgrade and the testing that Kunal's already mentioned. What I would say is the 1st and the 2nd phases can absolutely be done anytime, really, because they don't have a direct operational impact on the pipeline that you're actively developing, other than taking some time and headspace away from some of the more senior developers to work through that. A common strategy is for customers to uplift their dev environments and then to subsequently do a prod upgrade after they've done their initial round of regression testing. That's definitely part of that recommended process, because quite often processes and objects developed in a new version in dev can be put into release files and can be imported into a previous version of Blue Prism. I think there was only one version around the 6.6 series where that became kind of disruptive because of the layout of stages in a given chunk of XML. But yeah, a lot of customers will do that. That phased upgrade approach to dev prod to make sure that they minimize that disruption as much as possible.
Great, thank you for that. And everybody on the call, feel free to ask them questions. I know a couple are coming in. So another one, I think this.
Paula, sorry, just to interrupt there. Just on that last question, the one thing that I've seen, and we mentioned it a couple of times on this call, is why, whilst they can do everything in parallel, as we've just been articulating there, why not let somebody else do that, right? Rather than take the pain away, give it to Blue Prism or WonderBotz, and we'll do that for them. We've done it 1,000 times, and therefore we know what we're doing. We can do that whilst they focus on building more of the pipeline and getting the value back to the business quickly. So working collaboration with partners to accelerate that, I think that's something that we're seeing an awful lot of. Sorry, just to interject there and add.
Not a problem at all. I think that's definitely something, you know, when it comes to some of these parts that become commoditized, even within an RPA Center of Excellence program, it's crucial for you to really evaluate, do you want all your senior developers working on a migration and regression testing? Because probably not. I'd rather be putting them to better work, right, to better use. Like Kunal, we save him for the good stuff, you know what I mean? So, and it's the same kind of concept when you're thinking through, especially at enterprise scale, you know, how you're going to go about the migration. So there's a very tactical question and then a couple of more in the interest of time. So I will direct this one at Rob. Can we use Blue Prism v6 license on version 7.3.1 after upgrade? So in their infrastructure, they're currently at version 6.10.5 and planning to upgrade to 7.3.1. So, so tactically, is that possible in the new world?
So version 6 and version 7 licenses are distinct. There's a difference in terms of how the license is assigned. So you can't reuse a version 6 license in a version 7 install. It just won't let you import it. It will say that it doesn't recognize the format. But you can request a version 7 license from your account manager. So please feel free to reach out to them. They'll be able to walk you through the steps to get that issued. And that should allow you to continue your upgrade planning as required.
Perfect. And then in terms of timing, right? So since we're talking about moving in, especially if there's a license nuance that can't be transposed in this case, how extensive is the testing, the regression testing? Are you finding that this is typical, or is this something to kind of, you know, add additional cycles in for learnings? What would your experience on that be? I'll direct that at you. both of you, Kunal and Rob. I think you guys can answer this. This is where Martin and I step out on answering questions.
I can talk a little bit about this. So I've done this with multiple clients at this point. So I think mostly what you should obviously test each and all your processes, but the level of testing that you want to do would depend on what the process looks like. If it's something more complex, which has a lot of different scenarios, then I would say just picking up some of the major ones is enough, because once the process is working fine in the new environment without issues, I think there's very low possibility that like in one of the branches you might miss something. Another approach that one of the clients I worked with did is that they had a lot of different underlying applications that they were automating. So they picked and chose like one process which interacted with each application, because application compatibility was the main thing that they were worried about. That worked fine. So once we tested each one process per application, I think we were feeling good and the migration went smoothly.
Fantastic. Rob, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, if I'm honest, because there isn't one answer for every customer. We have some clients whose RPA automations are so business critical, it's kind of mandatory that each process is tested, because the impact to the business, if that was to become unavailable, would be significant. However, I'd really highlight Kunal's point on, if you have several automations that all deal with the same business application, there is an argument there that, if there's going to be a problem interacting with that business application, it's probably going to be visible from the outset. The big problem obviously is when you have a customer with a very broad automation estate, where every application is kind of only automated by one or two processes. That's where obviously that approach to testing can also have its limitations, because you effectively still end up having to run quite a lot of testing on that one. But it's
Rob,
funny.
To just kind of follow up though, would you say, and I didn't mean to interject, but I think the nuance of the question is, if our traditional planning in the land of 6, is that going to serve us the same in the land of 7? In other words, are there additional considerations for testing that you otherwise wouldn't have had in previous versions? Okay. Not necessarily the complexity of the automations. Can you speak to that?
Okay. So some of the bigger changes we have between 6 and 7 are related to our browser automation capabilities. So from version 6, where we used WebSocket based browser extensions, we moved to native message host extensions in version 7. It's a fundamentally different architecture behind the scenes, but we have developed it to be something that customers would be able to move from 6 to 7 and not see any significant impacts. But what that has led quite a few customers to do is put a little bit more focus on browser testing when they're moving from 6 to 7 because of that architectural change. Outside of that, other than small tweaks and bug fixes to existing spy modes, there have not been any similar kind of fundamental changes that would lead me to say that any significant changes would need to be made to kind of a 6 to 6 upgrade plan that had served a customer well in the past.
Fantastic, Rob. No, that's thank you for clarifying that. I think that's super helpful. So the last one is really more about strategy. So if we haven't started planning yet, right, which I think it was about 40% of the Blue Prism install base has to make some decision of whether it's going to version 7 on-prem, whether it's, taking that leap and migrating to the cloud, once and for all, whatever that choice of cloud might be, or if it's piloting, testing, and ultimately deploying next gen that Blue Prism has launched. So in that planning phase, in that thinking through, what would be your one key piece of advice for somebody who hasn't started planning yet, and what that first step of consideration should look like?
I'll go first.
Start with you. Yeah, I'll start with you, Rob. Go ahead.
Sorry, being keen. So the key piece of advice I'd give to customers who are yet to start their planning is to really have a think about what their cloud adoption strategy is. Any customer who could adopt a next gen migration rather than kind of an on-prem version 7 upgrade, I would say would be really well placed moving forwards. So customers, I think, need to have a good think about whether a migration to BPC or any other cloud hosting vendor would be possible, or, you know, with a next gen being a hybrid deployment where the key sensitive work remains on-prem and the services in the back end are hosted on the cloud, I'd advise people to really have a think about, you know, if those more cloud friendly options would suit their needs, because, you know, any move in that direction is going to be positive in the long run, and it's definitely something that you need to think of as part of your upgrade planning.
That's fantastic, Rob. Martin, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I guess the add to that is, you know, the time's now. If people want to get value from their automation estate, it's got to be to add the extra features and functionalities that come with adjacent technologies. We know that, and the concept from Gartner has already highlighted that as well. It's highlighted something that we've seen as a shift in our own client base at WonderBotz, and we've seen people migrating to our area cloud already and asking us how to help them out, because they want that as a next step into AI. I think it's great news that next gen from Blue Prism is following the same lines. It means we're all doing the same thing. You know, Gartner is shouting about it, we're doing it, Blue Prism are doing it. It's happening. That shift is happening already. That's great news for our industry, by the way, I think, you know, because that means we're giving value back to the business users, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But we can do it in a way that is controlled and is understood. And those technologies are there already for us to incorporate. So the thing, I guess, if there was a one key thing that I would leave from anyone that's looking at this presentation now, either now or later on, is start planning now. Get in contact with us. It's a well-trodden path. Get in contact with Rob. Get in contact with myself. Get anyone on this call. We'll leave those details at the end of the call and share them. But get in contact with us, because it's, you know, we want to get it ahead of this.
Yep, I would totally agree. And as I begin to share the contact information of everybody who's spoken today for the audience, Kunal, final words of advice. You've done this a million times over, have probably the most hands-on experience of anybody on this call. Tell us a little bit about the advice of how you'd think through getting started, or how you've advised our clients to think through getting started.
I would say it's the majority of the decisions that you make during the planning phase are the most important. So once you actually define the plan that you're going to follow, how much time it's going to take, what are the different cycles that you're going to follow, it's just making that first right decision that's the most important. Because I have had like clients who sort of like wanted to get ahead of it, or like wanted to move really fast, and that was not an ideal situation for all of us. So I think it's just have a good picture of what's in your current environment, and also think about where your future investments are going to go, because that's what's going to decide what path you take.
Well put. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. To the audience, thank you so much. Stay tuned for marketing emails from WonderBotz as we continue to drive value through webinars on different facets of how intelligent automation continues to change. So we keep up with it once a month. We hope you join us for next month's session. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Take care and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, everyone.
Cheers all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.